Our society, our families, and our nation all depend on a vibrant and growing planet. This special edition of Profiles in STEM highlights careers across the environmental sciences. Scientists who daily create and support systems to revitalize our home, our Earth, our sustainable planet.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Person-to-Person Network. Welcome to Profiles in STEM. Our career series will feature an amazing STEM professional who is shaping lives and building the future. I'm your host, Katie Culbert, and if you haven't already done so, please leave a like and subscribe to our network. Joining me today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Kerry Emanuel. Dr. Emanuel is the Cecil and Ida Green Professor of Atmospheric Science, as well as the co-director of Lorenz Center at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. As a world-renowned meteorologist and climate scientist, Dr. Emanuel's specialty is hurricane physics and dynamics. In fact, Dr. Emanuel was the first to investigate how long-term climate change affects hurricane activity. Dr. Emanuel is also the author or co-author of over 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and 3 books. Dr. Emanuel, welcome to our program.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's nice to be on.
So, Dr. Emanuel, did you always know you wanted to be a scientist? Can you tell us about a specific moment that inspired you to first pursue a career in STEM, more specifically in meteorology and climate science?
Well, that's a great question. According to my older brother, who's 6 years older than I am, I was already crawling to windows to watch thunderstorms when I was a year old. Of course, I don't remember that, but I was interested in the weather right from the get-go. But I probably started thinking about making a career out of it in grade school after having taken some science courses, which had little laboratory components. And even though we didn't talk about the weather in those courses, I got hooked on science.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Speaking about that today in thunderstorms, I had one this morning, and just like hearing how loud the rain is and all the stuff going on, I can see why it was really intriguing even at such a young age. So, Dr. Emanuel, you are a pioneer in your field. Your research on global climate, hurricane, and cyclone activity is groundbreaking, especially your use of computer modeling. Can you provide our audience with an overview of your latest research?
Sure, I can. So I started out in the middle 1980s getting very interested in hurricanes. I actually was working on other things like tornadoes before that. And like most scientists, I was driven forward just by pure curiosity. I wanted to know how they worked. And at the time, we didn't have a very good idea of how they worked. And so I was able, and my students and research associates were able to make some progress on that. And it's very, very rewarding. I have to say it's a great thing to be able to make discoveries and have other people test them and verify them and so forth. But lately, maybe because I'm older now, I asked myself, okay, this is a lot of fun and we've learned a lot, but can we now use what we've learned to actually help people in some tangible way? And there are several avenues I've taken, but perhaps the most important, at least to me, is to use our understanding of hurricanes to make much better estimates of long-term hurricane risk. This is really important. It's important if you're designing a bridge or a ship. It's important if you're deciding whether to build on the coast, and if you do, how strong you should make the buildings. And we don't do a very good job of that today. It's left to an industry that is almost a monopoly and doesn't have a strong incentive to advance. And the main problem is that it doesn't account for climate change. And when I say that, I don't mean climate change is going to happen, although that's important. It's climate change that's already happened. So to give you one example, my work suggested that the rains that flooded Houston in Hurricane Harvey back in 2017 were three times more likely to have occurred then than in 1970 because of climate change. And climate change affects the extreme, very improbable events a lot more than it affects the everyday kinds of events. And other teams have more or less verified that. That's huge. And yet the insurance industry relies on historical estimates going back 50 years. They're really kind of getting it wrong. And that has a lot of bad consequences for us. It means the insurers might not be able to pay when we have a storm. It means we don't know the risks we assume when we move to a place like Houston. So I've been trying to do better on that.
Wow, your work is really fascinating, and I can definitely see how it will help save many lives in the future. So, after obtaining your doctorate, you've spent the bulk of your career at MIT, and you wear many hats today, one of which is serving as the co-founder and co-director of the Lorenz Center. Can you provide us with an overview of the goals of this important think tank?
Yeah, we actually had two goals in mind when we established the center. One was a little bit personal for us, is that Ed Lorenz was a very important scientist. Some think that his work on chaos theory constituted the third great scientific revolution of the 20th century, the first two being general relativity and quantum physics. Chaos theory has had amazing repercussions all throughout society, but sadly, although he got many prizes and awards around the world, he was never recognized in any official capacity at his home institution, MIT, and we thought that was too bad. So we wanted to do something to honor Professor Lorenz, who was also a personal friend of mine. A fascinating man, very shy, very self-effacing, never asked for anything. So that was one of the motivations. The other was equally important, and that is that I found a lot of young people your age and maybe a little older and a little bit younger as well, thought that climate science was strictly devoted to the problem of trying to figure out what's happening with global warming. Global warming is terribly important and something we should pay attention to. But what I thought young people, particularly young people who wanted to go into science, were missing was the intellectual excitement of climate science, which would be there even if there were no such thing as global warming. Climate science was around a long time before we started worrying about that. And all the fascinating work that's done, for example, using ice cores from the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets to obtain a million-year-old record of what the Earth's climate has actually done. And the mathematics of unraveling why it behaved the way it did with roughly 10 ice ages separated by relatively mild periods, which we're in the middle of right now. There have been really, truly remarkable discoveries. It's a very vibrant and exciting field intellectually, but all of that excitement was getting swept under the rug by, it's understandable, I'm not blaming anyone, but by the concern about global warming. So climate scientists were being portrayed as people who just ran enormous models that they didn't understand to make predictions. But that does happen. It's a relatively recent phenomenon, and most of what goes on in the field is just plain good old-fashioned science. And we wanted to create a center to do basic science and climate, and that's what the Lorenz Center is devoted to.
Wow, thank you for that explanation. I'm really happy that you're able to honor someone so important to science and also make it a super happy and fun environment for students to learn new things. Dr. Emanuel, one of your many contributions to the public is also the consumer-oriented interactive website and portal, climateprimer.mit.edu. This link can be found in the description below. This website was designed to explore climate science, climate change, risks, and solutions. Can you provide us with more insight behind your inspiration and website for this portal?
Sure. It started out as a fairly normal pamphlet, literally a written printed pamphlet that we were passing out, and it's still posted on my homepage. It's free. It's a PDF file. And it wasn't my idea, although I enthusiastically embraced it. It wasn't my idea to turn that into a website. That was the brainchild of some other people at MIT. who are very gifted at this sort of thing. And MIT actually hired a professional private company who specialized in websites like that. So they basically, with my cooperation, and I had to put a certain amount of work into it, they basically took my climate primer, the printed version, and turned it into this quite interesting, I think, quite interesting website. But all the artistry of creating that particular layout and the illustrations and the way it's done, it's not my doing. It's this team of professionals. And the website, to their credit, not to mine, won an award called the Webby Award. I didn't even know they existed, but people give out awards for good websites, so that they must have done a very good job.
Yes, I highly suggest you guys, the viewers, to check it out. I recently checked out the website and it's really informative and it taught me new things that I didn't even know. And it's an excellent resource if you want to learn more about climate science and climate change and ways that we can create solutions. Also, as you mentioned, it's really visually appealing, so I can see why it won an award. So I know that I've said it already, but you truly juggle many responsibilities. Is it possible for you to give us a snapshot of what a typical day is like for you?
Oh, yes, I noticed that I got a little bit of heads up that you were going to ask that question, and I thought about it for a long time. The big problem for me, and maybe this is a plus, is there's no such thing as a typical day. I think that's true of a lot of scientists. This is what's great about it. It's not a 9-to-5 job in the sense you come in and you make a widget and then you go home. It's so different one day to the next. I mean, the only thing that's really regular about it, I think, is teaching, where you actually have a schedule of classes. But a typical day, if there is one, when I'm actually at MIT, is spent meeting with students, meeting with colleagues, going to seminars. I hardly have enough much time to do my own research. I kind of save that for evenings and weekends. So there's always something interesting going on. There's always something you didn't expect. And then you do, as a scientist today, the pandemic aside, of course, we would do a lot of traveling as well, to meetings, we were invited to give seminars and so forth. So there's always a lot of variety in the scientific life.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That thing is one of the best things about science, and like many jobs that you are in love with, is that you can have something new and fun every single day. And I think that's one of the best things to look forward to. So, Dr. Emanuel, we've explored many areas today, and you were constantly on the go, very busy, but very fascinating too. Is there something else you would like to share with our audience as they explore STEM and careers in STEM?
Well, I just like to say that if you're interested in science, especially in this country now, it's not that difficult to make a career out of it. And if you can do that, it's a really, really super way of living. I think it's a great career to have. But to prepare yourself for that, you have to be serious about taking courses in STEM. And math, and in my particular field, climate science, is very mathematical in the end. So I would encourage listeners to take lots of math, particularly when they get up to the college level. And physics, because basic physics is important, and increasingly chemistry and even biology are important in climate science. So the wonderful thing about my field in some ways is it's very broad. And so you need to learn a lot of different things, and that might sound like too much of a challenge in some ways, but it makes it even more fascinating, and you get to meet a very broad cross-section of the scientific community when you do that.
Thank you. That's really great advice. Guys, don't be afraid to follow your dreams and put challenges for yourself, because you'll achieve great things in the future and you'll be very happy with the awards. Like, you could become like Dr. Emanuel, a world-renowned scientist who's making differences in this world. So I would like to thank my special guest, Dr. Kerry Emanuel. Dr. Emanuel, it was truly an honor speaking with you today. Thank you for spending time with us.
Bill, it was a great pleasure. Thank you.
And to our viewers, please join us again for another exciting episode and another remarkable STEM professional. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our network. You have been listening to Profiles in STEM. Thank you. Katie Culbert signing off.